I, 26 female, have been with my fiancé, Jake, 28 male, for 3 years. We've had a great relationship, and I truly believed he was the one. Jake is thoughtful, loving, and genuinely my best friend. I was thrilled when he proposed a year ago, and we've been planning a beautiful destination wedding ever since. It was going to be small and intimate, with only our closest friends and family on a beach far from home. But there's been a major problem in our relationship since day one, and that problem is his mother, Barbara. From the moment I met Barbara, I could tell she didn't like me. I remember that first dinner we had together, the way she kept scrutinizing me like she was examining every flaw she could find. She made it very clear, right from the beginning, that she didn't think I was good enough for Jake. At first it was subtle, like comments about how Jake usually dated someone with a more similar background, or how she always pictured Jake with someone a little more traditional. But it quickly became clear who she really wanted Jake to end up with: his ex, Lily. Now here's the kicker. Lily and Jake broke up because Lily cheated on him. Jake and I had talked about it early on in our relationship, and he was very clear that the breakup had been extremely painful for him. He had moved on and was certain he'd made the right decision. Yet Barbara never seemed to get the memo. According to her, Lily was classy, from a good family, and the kind of woman who really understands Jake. Never mind that she'd hurt him in one of the worst ways possible. Barbara still seemed to think that Lily was perfect for him. For years, I tried to ignore it. I told myself that maybe Barbara would come around once she saw how much Jake and I cared about each other. I thought she'd eventually accept that I was the woman her son wanted to spend his life with. But it only got worse. Every time we saw her, she'd bring up Lily in some way. How she ran into her and she looked amazing, or how Lily would have known what to do in certain situations. I could see Jake get uncomfortable, but he mostly brushed it off, saying she was just stuck in the past and that it didn't mean anything. Jake did speak up a few times, and each time Barbara would turn on the waterworks, claiming she was just trying to look out for him and that she only wanted what was best. She'd turn it around, making Jake feel guilty for calling her out, and unfortunately, he'd end up backing down to keep the peace. I understood he didn't want to cause family drama, so I tried to be patient. But there's only so much patience a person can have, especially when it's your future mother-in-law openly dismissing you in favor of someone who betrayed the man you love. But I was determined not to let her ruin our wedding. The date was set, the venue was booked, and we were just a few days away from our flights. I'd packed everything, double-checked my documents, and even organized my travel papers, including my passport, which I kept in a specific drawer in my bedroom. I checked it just days before to make sure everything was in order, so I knew exactly where it was. Then, 2 days before we were supposed to leave, I got home after running some last-minute errands and thought I'd check my passport one final time. I opened the drawer, and my passport was gone. It wasn't just misplaced, it was completely missing. I was immediately in panic mode, tearing the room apart. I knew exactly where I'd put it, and I couldn't understand how it could have just disappeared. After an hour of searching every possible place it could have been, I was more confused and frustrated than ever. I knew I hadn't moved it. The only other person with access to our house was Jake's mom, Barbara, who had a spare key for emergencies. But still, it seemed too crazy to even consider. Why would she take my passport? What would she gain from that? Then it hit me. The cameras. A few months ago, Jake and I had installed a basic home security system with cameras that covered the main areas of the house, including the hallway that led to our bedroom. We'd set it up for extra security, mostly as a precaution. I thought it was unlikely, but I was desperate, so I pulled up the footage to check if anything unusual had happened. As soon as I watched it, I felt sick. There, on the screen, was Barbara. She let herself into our house using the spare key, looked around as if making sure no one was home, and walked straight to the drawer in my bedroom. She opened it, took out my passport, slipped it into her purse, and left, all in less than 2 minutes. She looked calm, like she knew exactly what she was doing. The reality of what she'd done hit me like a ton of bricks. Barbara had actually gone out of her way to steal my passport right before my wedding, and what I can only assume was an attempt to prevent me from boarding the plane. She must have thought that without it, I wouldn't be able to get to the wedding, and maybe she believed that would change Jake's mind, or make him see reason. The level of disrespect, The calculated nature of her actions. I was floored. I called Jake immediately, barely keeping it together as I told him what had happened. But he didn't believe me. He laughed, as if the whole thing was a joke, saying, "Come on, my mom would never do that." He thought I was being paranoid or imagining things. I told him to get over to my place immediately, that I had something to show him that would change his mind. When he got there, I didn't say a word. I just pulled up the footage and let him watch as his mother took my passport. His face went pale, and he was visibly shaken. But then, instead of getting angry or siding with me, he started making excuses for her. He said things like, maybe she just thought it was something else, or she might have wanted to arrange some kind of surprise for us. It was clear he didn't want to believe his mom could do something so horrible. At that moment, something inside me just shut off. I felt like I'd been fighting so hard to be accepted by his family, and here he was, still defending her, even when there was undeniable proof of her sabotage. I told him right then and there, the wedding is off. Jake looked at me in shock, saying I was overreacting and that he'd handle it after the wedding. But I told him this couldn't wait. His mother had tried to prevent me from even getting to the wedding, and he still wasn't taking my side. I couldn't imagine spending the rest of my life with someone who would always be making excuses for someone who clearly didn't respect me or our relationship. He begged me to reconsider, promising he'd talk to her and make her apologize. But I felt like the damage was already done. He'd shown me where his loyalties lay, and I couldn't unsee it. I told him that unless he was willing to confront her and demand real accountability, I couldn't move forward. This wasn't something I could just brush under the rug or deal with later. If he couldn't stand up for me now, what kind of future would we have? He left, devastated, and since then, he's been blowing up my phone with texts, voicemails, and promises to fix everything. Barbara has also been reaching out, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, and that she was sorry and that will never happen again. But to me, it feels way too convenient. She's saying all this only because she got caught. I don't think there's any misunderstanding when you sneak into someone's home and steal their passport before a wedding. Some of my friends think I did the right thing by calling off the wedding, saying that I was right to stand up for myself and demand respect. They think Jake would never fully have my back if he's still excusing this behavior. Others, however, think I overreacted, saying I should have given Jake a chance to make things right and that I shouldn't throw away our relationship over one bad incident. They say I should have waited to see if he really stood up to her, or maybe go to therapy together to address the issue. I don't know what to think. On one hand, I love Jake, but on the other, I can't ignore how his mother went out of her way to sabotage our wedding. And worse, Jake couldn't fully defend me. I'm scared that if I look past this, I'll be setting myself up for a lifetime of being second to his mother. I need someone who can prioritize our relationship and protect it, especially when his family crosses major boundaries. So, Reddit. Am I the a-hole for canceling my wedding after discovering my future mother-in-law stole my passport? OP's future mother-in-law went so far as to sabotage OP's wedding, and Jake's reaction is a massive red flag. This isn't a small issue. It's a serious betrayal, and the fact that he couldn't side with OP immediately is concerning. I think OP did the right thing by standing up for herself and canceling the wedding. Mother-in-law is not going to change and continue to make OP's life hell. And now let's hear the community's opinion. Not the a-hole. Your mother-in-law crossed every boundary, and Jake should have been on your side from the beginning. If he can't protect you from her now, it's a huge problem. You deserve someone who won't make excuses for his family's awful behavior. Good for you for putting your foot down. Not the a-hole, and honestly, you dodged a bullet. If Jake can't see how serious this is, he's not ready to stand up for you in the way you deserve. You made the right call. You deserve better than a life of being disrespected by your mother-in-law with no support from your partner. Not the a-hole, but maybe you could give Jake a chance if he's willing to cut off his mom until she apologizes and changes. He needs to prove he's committed to you. This isn't just about the wedding. It's about whether he'll protect you from toxic behavior in the future. My husband cheated on me and moved out 4 months ago. We were in the process of filing for a divorce, but we were still getting our stuff in order first. He moved in with the other woman he's been cheating on me with for the past 4 years. I've been married to him for a year, but we've been together for 5 years. My soon-to-be ex-husband passed away 2 months ago in an accident. Since we were still legally married, I get everything. I'm still the beneficiary of his life insurance, his investment accounts, everything. And none of our assets were even split yet. The woman he's been living with came wailing to my door, saying she's supposed to get his half, and that she's expecting a baby with him. This is the first I heard of a pregnancy. My ex was cremated as per his wishes. He has no other family. There isn't any formal way for her to get a child tested for paternity, if the child even exists. I'm also not legally obligated to provide anything for his supposed child. I simply called the police after she refused to leave my doorstep. Am I the a-hole? While I'm sad my husband died, I stopped loving him after the betrayal, but I'm definitely financially much more secure now. I've been getting grief from 2 people for not splitting the money. Not the a-hole. That's what she gets for sleeping with a married man. You have complete control of all his assets, and rightly so. You were his wife. Not the a-hole. She got his love, and you got his money to compensate your 5 years wasted on him. Call the cops each time she's coming to see you. Not the a-hole. There is no his half. He died while still married to you, so jointly held marital assets pass to you. Whoever is giving you grief, it is ridiculous for them to expect you to split your money with this woman. My stepfather, since I was a toddler, was diagnosed about 10 years ago with cancer, and during a checkup a year ago, was given approximately 12 months to live. He cashed out his life insurance policy, and with that money, went on a spending spree fixing up the house, paying out the mortgage, renovating, and basically kind of sorting out his affairs whilst he still had the ability. During the workday, we worked in the same office. He said that he wanted to pay for my shed that I had been pricing up in the prior few months. I declined because I'm studying, and whilst my husband works full-time and is on a decent wage, I would prefer to leave my inheritance in liquid cash form, so that if emergency struck, or something to that effect, I wouldn't like to be caught short. The cost of the shed was exactly 30% of my inheritance. The amounts people were getting and who was getting what was common knowledge amongst the family. He made it clear that he was offering this as a gift, and it would not affect my inheritance. I accepted his offer. He arranged for the money to be transferred to me, and then 2 days later, he wrote and signed his will with a lawyer. The money he offered me was not mentioned in the will, nor was my inheritance reduced by this balance. I should mention that my stepbrother, my dad's bio son, had arranged to receive 40% of his inheritance prior to my father's death, and as such, the will had his inheritance reduced by this figure. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, and my father has now passed away. It's been a very rough time. My stepbrother was made aware of the fact that my father paid for my shed, and is now accusing me of conniving money out of my father, manipulating him and such. He and my mother are now producing typed documents that they claim prove my father changed his mind on his deathbed and wanted the shed included. Today I received an anonymous package in the mail of a little shovel that had been painted gold, signed by Sender G. Digger. Someone has tried to tell me I'm a gold digger for asserting that I am owed my full inheritance in line with the agreement between my father and I. Here's where I may be the a-hole. I made the agreement with my father in good faith 10 months before he died, and I plan to force the agreement via the execution of the will in contradiction of the typed-up document. He was of sound mind and body at the time, and he went palliative around 3 weeks ago, so he had 9 months to change the will if he wanted to, and he never did. He never told me he wanted to change it. It never came up until he was in the hospital and my family found out he paid for it via my brother, who chose to tell everyone. There are a lot of details in this story I've omitted because, frankly, the whole saga is massive. The crutch of this is that the additional money was offered outside of the estate as a gift, but this pill appears to be too bitter for the rest of the family to swallow. So, am I the a-hole for standing my ground? Not the a-hole. Your father gave you a gift. That's all this was. Not the a-hole. Your stepfather gave you a gift. He put you in his will. Stepbrother and mother need to accept that. Not the a-hole, but I smell a legal battle coming, and I'm so sorry for your loss. I hope you have enough time to grieve amongst all this. Not only stand your ground, but mount that little gold shovel on a plaque and mount it on the wall of your shed like a damn trophy. Your agreement was with your dad, and let your unhappy relatives take you to court and waste their money fighting the will. Waste a little money of your own and talk to a lawyer yourself. In case they get feisty, you will be prepared. Not the a-hole for taking the shed. He offered and you accepted, and nobody cares what anybody else has to say about it. My stepchildren's mother wants me to sell my home so that they can receive 50% of the proceeds. I am refusing. She has told me that I am hurting my late husband's children and that I am an a-hole. My late husband, David, had 2 children, Thomas and Megan. Their mother, Kelly, had primary custody, with David getting the kids every other weekend. Kelly was just a joy, dragging David into court at every opportunity. If David found $1 on the street, Kelly would drag him into court to get her fair share. David always took care of his kids, paying not just his child support, but also much more. When David and I decided to build our home, we set up what would happen if one of us died before the other. Basically, the survivor would get the house, but when the survivor died or sold the home, 50% of the proceeds would go to their designated heirs. For David, his children. For me, it was my sister. We were both contributing equally to the new home. Then in 2018, David decided to change jobs, and he was taking 2 weeks off between the end of his old job and the start of his new one. David had almost all of his insurance, including life insurance, through his employer. He was killed in an accident a week before he was to start his new job. David had a will that left his savings. We kept our finances separate, and 401k to his children. But there wasn't a large amount. There was no life insurance. We did have mortgage insurance, so when David died, the house was paid off. Kelly hated me and did everything she could to make her kids do so as well. So it was no surprise we didn't have any contact after David passed. I was surprised when Kelly reached out to me a couple of weeks ago. She said that she and the children are struggling financially since she ended up having to close down her business in 2020. She's working now, but at a low-paying call center job. She wants me to sell the house so that half of the proceeds would go to the kids, and she can use that for their education, medical expenses. According to Kelly, Megan is having medical issues and needs treatment that her insurance does not cover, and Kelly cannot afford. I said no. I was not selling my home. Honestly, I could care less what Kelly thinks. She has been a witch to me since the day I met her. However, David's parents, whose opinion I do respect, also called to say that they believe it is what David would have wanted. I told them I would think about it. I know my husband loved his children more than anything and would have done anything for them. Right now, living without rent, mortgage, I am on track to retire very early. I have decided I am not giving that up. His parents told me that David would be ashamed of me for being a selfish witch, which I admit hurt to hear. Am I the a-hole? Edit. Some of the questions on this message have made me realize that if I agreed to somehow mortgage 50% of the house to pay their children out early, assuming that is even a valid option, that I would be spending over $1,000 more a month than I would have if David were still alive, and I had half of a mortgage payment. David was responsible for financially supporting Thomas and Megan. I am not. I'm going to tell Kelly and David's parents that I will not be selling the house anytime soon and to not contact me on this matter again. Your home. I'd die in that house. Absolutely. If David's parents feel so strongly about it, let them fork out the funds for their grandkids, not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. Your husband would also have wanted to make sure you were taken care of. Do not set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Sell when, if you are ready, and not a moment before. Kelly has demonstrated her propensity to squeeze your late husband for every cent she could, and now that he's dead, she's setting her sights on you. She's shown you who she is, so believe her. Go full no contact with her if you can. Do not budge an inch on selling your house. This will sound cold, but the stepchildren are ultimately not your responsibility. If you want to find a way to help with Megan's medical expenses, that's your prerogative. But get a lawyer so that you can execute it in a way that Kelly has no say over it. Not the a-hole. His sister lived with us for a while, with us in my mom's house. But she couldn't follow house rules, and she made it hell. She was a hoarder and violated too many boundaries. It strained our relationship, and I ended up severely depressed and developed PTSD. She lived with us for 7 months and finally moved out in March 2021. But when she did, she left her entire room behind save one bag and carry-on when she moved out of state. Fast forward to today, September 20th, 2021, and her room is in the same condition. I had been proactive about self-improvement and focusing on what I can control. So I've been cleaning up the house and becoming more minimalistic among other things like therapy, my physical health, and other aspects of my life. I didn't feel comfortable touching her things because she still wanted some of them, I think. But it reminded me of that traumatic and painful period in my life. I wanted to start fresh and to move on without her presence lingering in my home. I had discussed it with my fiancé, and he and his family talked about it, and they said they'd handle it. She's not here anymore, so there's no reason for her stuff to be here either. They'd ship off what she wanted and get rid of what she didn't. They left me out of the loop, of course. They often do this, even if it directly affects me. But that was the agreement. Well, 6 months after she's been gone, nothing has changed. No thank you for putting up with their crap. No sorry. No compensation for taking an entire room in my house. And no effort to do anything about it on their part. And I know they have the money to do it, because they all got big fat life insurance payouts last year, and the sibling she went to live with just bought a gigantic brand new house. It's not an issue of money. I finally put my foot down and said it needs to be gone by end of month, or else I'm tossing it out. Clearly it wasn't important enough if half a year has passed. Time to toss it out. I want to enter the holiday season clear of a lot of old trauma and baggage. Now my fiancé is mad, and he yelled at me saying I'm not patient enough and that I'm overreacting. That's almost always his go-to whenever I bring up any concerns. He always minimizes it, or tries to brush me off as being overly emotional. His reason as to why it hasn't been done is because he's lazy. This is despite him criticizing me every day about how dirty our house is. The same guy who eats food and leaves dirty dishes around. The same guy who leaves wrappers and scrunched up paper balls everywhere. The same guy who leaves his dirty socks all over the house. The same guy who says he doesn't care about putting in effort anymore because he's with me. He wants to break up now because I'm overreacting when I've been patiently waiting for half a ducking year. He's quick enough to drop everything and immediately help his family. But for me, he'll put it off as long as possible. He'd rather break up than do what he said he would do a half a year ago. Not the a-hole. Don't marry this guy. In fact, take him up on his offer to break up. Tell him to take his sister's crap when he goes, or leave it when you go. Not the a-hole, but you have a bigger problem than stuff in your house. I hope you read what you wrote when talking about your fiancé and how he treats you. Your fiancé needs to be your ex-fiancé if he continues to disrespect you and put you down. Why be with someone who would rather break up than do what he promises? Perhaps breaking up would be for the best. Kick both him and his sister's crap out of your house, because it sure seems like your problem is him and his family. Is this the life you want to grow old with? Not the a-hole. I'm a married mother of 2 kids, who are 6 and 10 years old. Before my wife got pregnant, she told me that she wanted to stay home with any kids we had when they were young. We ran the math, and it would work, so she is a stay-at-home parent. Here, kids start school in September of the calendar year they turn 6 years old, which for my oldest is this year. My wife is returning to work later this month. My wife is an accountant. Since tax season is the slow time at my job, I take lots of time off, and my wife worked at her old firm for a couple of months every year. She also kept up with professional development, industry news, and networking while she was off work. We made sure to budget so we could have some money in savings, and that I had a good life insurance policy since I'm the one working full-time. Basically, we budgeted and planned and had a safety net. My sister is also a stay-at-home parent. However, her and her husband spend more than he made every month and maxed out their credit cards on expensive clothes and vacations. My sister has no degree or educational savings. She has only had one minimum wage job, and she quit when she was pregnant by telling her manager to shove it up her butt. These are things my sister has told me herself. Her husband had a job, but now he's been arrested and will likely be going to prison for the next 5 to 10 years. Just an estimate on the amount of time. My sister's in a bad spot, even with family helping her where we can. She blames my wife for putting the idea in her, my sister's head, that she too can stay home. My wife never advised her. I understand that she is stressed out, so the first time, I did not say anything, because even my wife told me to leave it alone. The next time she started badgering my wife and blaming her, I told my sister to back off and stop blaming my wife for her own problems. This is after my wife offered to watch her kids while she met with the staff at the benefits office or went to job interviews. At that point, my sister cried, and now she's shouting from the rooftops about how awful me and my wife were to her. I'm irate and wish I had said something the first time. It's not our fault my sister didn't plan better. I would hope to never go to prison, but we planned and sacrificed for my wife to be able to stay home. My sister is angry at us, but I'm irate with her for putting this blame on my wife, who didn't do anything. Not the a-hole. Your sister needs to have some accountability for her own stuff. This definitely is not on you and your wife. Me taking someone's advice doesn't make my decision their fault. Not the a-hole. Your sister is blaming someone other than herself because she can't possibly be responsible for her poor planning. Oh yes, she can. You do you, and she can do she. Don't become financially responsible for her, or you will never get her to stand on her own 2 feet. Not the a-hole. Your sister is ridiculous. She is a grown adult. She could have thought about being a stay-at-home mom because of your family, but no one forced her to do it. Stop offering her help. With the way she is blaming your wife, she will continue to play the victim, and she will never be independent on her own.